Hi students, so our class is started from the sixth paper, sixth paper, philosophy of language, and this paper is very much interesting to deliberation about the speaker and to the hearer. So how do we speak and how hearer hears? So it depends on how speaker explain or how speaker clear the points and how it is accepted by the learner or hearers. So language, philosophy of language is such a subject that it studies the technique of language, how do we use the language, what is the significance of the using language, and how it is useful for our good deliberation and good understanding. So language plays a vital role to make the convenient communication between the hearer and the speaker. If the hearer unable to understand what the speakers say, that it makes a communication gap. So to remove the gaps between the hearer and speaker, the philosophy of language hence plays a good role to make the philosophy a good subject. So in this paper we have so many contents, but first we are going to describe how language is related to the world and how phrases explain the sense and reference in terms of language, and thirdly how Russell defines the language from the scope of descriptive analysis. So we are going details through this discussion. So now the main issues of philosophy of language. So if we are going to study about the philosophy of language, then we have to mark about the main issues. So number one issues is key features of contemporary Western philosophy. So language regards as the key features of contemporary Western philosophy. And number two, refutation of traditional thinkings like metaphysics, idealism, religious beliefs, moral obligation, literature. So philosophy of language is not such a just a theoretical concept, but it also a practical implications. So first, the key features of contemporary Western philosophy. So language is regarded the key features of contemporary philosophy to understand the philosophical objectives to philosophical problems or logical problems. So philosophy of language plays to divert the problems arised out of the critical thinking. And number B, refutation of traditional thinkings like metaphysics, idealism, religious belief, moral obligation, and literature. Because philosophy of language is not only the theoretical, but also it has some practical implications. However, metaphysics has no practical issues, or metaphysics has no any practical applications. So metaphysics deals with what after physics say. So this is sometimes of abstract ideas. So philosophy of language does not deal with this concept like existence of God, existence of soul, existence of something unseen objects. And again, philosophy of language also discards the concept of idealism. Idealism is a concept of the mind. So it is related to the idea that it relates our thinking. So how do we think, what mind wants, what mind sees? So idealism is based on the concept of the mind. So it is the primary issues of the mind. So language is not the primary issue of mind. Language is just the collocation, the what speaker says and how learners accept. So philosophy of language has no any role with the concept of idealism. Do you get it? Yes. Now religious belief. So religious belief is something supernatural. So it is something supernatural, and it is something a concept of unseen objects like God, Allah, etc. So we cannot explain the religious belief through use of language. Again, moral obligations. So moral obligations deals with the norms. How do we think? How do we behave? How do we behave? So behavior is one kind of our technique of our life, but behavior does not explain through the concept of philosophy of language. And also literature, sahitya. So literature means it is some poetry or prose or stories or novels, etc. But in literature, we are just going by explaining the concept. But here literature use the philosophy of language, but they are not using the philosophical sense in writing poems or writing stories or writing novels, etc. Now philosophy of language. So what is the scope that philosophy of language expands? Now importance given to factual analysis collected from the empirical knowledge. So philosophy of language is not the abstract one, but it depends on the factual analysis of the empirical knowledge. Number 2, language is the prime focal point. In philosophy of language, we have to focus only on our philosophical use of the language. So it is said that language is the prime focal point. Rational as well as logical analysis are important factors. So I have already told you that philosophy of language is a practical one. It has a scientific implications, and therefore rational as well as logical analysis are important factors in philosophy of language. So we cannot avoid these concepts, rational as well as logical analysis. And number 4, expression of one's attitude to others is the main issue of language, and it is the aim of philosophy of language. So philosophy of language attaches with the explanation of some contents what can be understood with the proper use of language. So if the use of language is not proper, or if we improperly used, then it makes a difference between the understanding and hearing. So in philosophy of language, there are two groups we get. There are two groups. One group, philosophers of language, A.J. Ayer, Morris and White, G.E. Moore, Rudolf Neurath, Carnap, Bertrand Russell, Ludwig Wittgenstein, J.L. Austin, P.F. Strawson. This is one group of the language philosopher, and other is like G.E. Moore. These are the philosophers, and these philosophers are divided in two groups. One group is Cambridge University and other group is Oxford University. So in Cambridge University, Yes, in Cambridge University, Bertrand Russell, Rudolf Otto, Maurice Leake are pre-Wittgenstein. And in Oxford University's group consists with G. E. Moore, A. J. Ayer, post-Wittgenstein, Gilbert Ryle, and P. F. Strawson. So these two groups are consisted all along the philosophical process of the language or philosophy of the language. So these philosophers are divided into groups. One is Cambridge University groups and other is Oxford University groups. So, but interestingly, Wittgenstein has Wittgenstein is both in two groups. And in Oxford University, Wittgenstein is known as post-Wittgenstein, and Cambridge University, Wittgenstein is known as pre-Wittgenstein. So these two groups are consisted in the philosophy of language. Now, important factor is that definition of the language. What is called language? So according to Darwin, language is purely human and non-instinctive method of communicating ideas, emotions, and desires by means of voluntarily produced symbols. And Noam Chomsky said, language is innate, that crucial parts of human language ability, one built into the brain and are programmed into our genes. So these are two main definition of language. One is given by Darwin and another is given by Noam Chomsky. So these two definitions we are getting from the books, and another important definition given by the Merriam-Webster dictionary. So language is a system of conventional spoken and written symbols used by the people, is a shared culture to communicate with each other. And Bloomfield said that a language is a system of arbitrarily vocal symbols by which members of a social group cooperate and internet. So now these are the main points of philosophy of language, and we are discussing about what is philosophy of language, and we are discussing about the philosophers involved in the two groups, Cambridge University and Oxford University, and their definition accordingly. So students, I think that this philosophy of language paper is very much tough to understand, but if it is understandable, then you can easily use the language in proper sense, and which will benefit to you for your better future. Thank you.